Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire. Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Mike.
How's it going?
It's going good.
Now, we tend to record these at different times and not necessarily like right before we air them. But how many days are you out from retirement as of this recording?
13.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Do you hear the sparkle in my voice when I say 13?
That's a sparkle? Is that what you keep trying to clear from your throat?
The sparkle. 13?
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible. It is a very weird feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to wrap it up at that because we're going to do whole episodes on my feelings post-retirement. It's a weird feeling leading up to things though. So you know what else puts a little sparkle in my voice, Mike?
What's that?
We have been receiving some really nice reviews lately.
Those
like we've been
best.
asking, at the beginning of our show, we've been asking for like more on some of the episodes for more people to leave reviews on Apple Podcasts. And they've just, it's really like we not just on Apple Podcasts, but like just we've been getting people sending us direct messages. And it really is just, I appreciate people that go out of their way to send a nice note. I try to do the same when I find value, and appreciate something or somebody. And it's just so nice to see some of the messages that we're getting. And again, like lately, it's been a bunch of reviews on Apple Podcasts. So thank you to everyone who has taken the time to do that. It genuinely makes us just, it just makes us feel great. And it gives us additional motivation to keep doing what we're doing.
And people might think that we are now these huge celebrities and we are, it's impersonal, but we read all this stuff. We send it to each other. We talk about it. It feels really nice.
Yeah.
So,
and if you message me on Instagram, I message everybody back.
Yeah, but
I'm like,
be careful. I mean, you're going to get way more message back.
You're my new friend. Yeah. If you send me a note on Instagram, you are my new friend and you will get lots of context back from me.
Yeah. And Maggie's going to have a ton of free time coming up. So you might get more friend than you bargained for.
Yeah, just wait until 13 working days from now. You're going to get lots of messages back from me.
All right, Maggie. So as a terrible segue into our episode, we're going to be talking about debt payoff.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to think of some segue of, we owe a debt to all of you who give us all this great feedback. And, Mike and I, we've shared this before. We don't personally have debt. I have had a good bit of debt throughout my life, but I've worked very hard to pay it off. And so we tend to kind of focus a lot of our show topics on things that are relevant to things that we know about and are more familiar with and kind of are happening in our lives at the time. And so we don't talk about debt as often, but we've tried to pull in more topics where we know that it is relevant to our listeners and something, even if it's not as relevant to us personally, it's something you guys want to hear about. And so that's why we're talking about debt today. Because unfortunately, the average person in this world has debt.
Yeah. So let's first define debt. So before we get into some tactical advice, we need to go through some background just so we can level set what we're talking about. Debt is owing money to somebody else, but it can take a lot of different forms. It can be credit card debt, car loans, student loans, a mortgage. I think it's pretty common that we hear these terms good debt versus bad debt, Maggie. And this one's always bothered me because if somebody's trying to sell you debt and they're telling you it's good debt, don't trust them. Because there is certainly a distinction, but it's not what you probably think it is.
Yeah. And when people talk about good debt and bad debt, I think there are some types of debt that are better or more appropriate in terms of, buying a home and buying a home within your means that you can afford to, pay the mortgage on and everything versus buying a car that's way beyond your means. And that's, way too big of a percentage of, what you make or something like that. But the one thing I always try to remember, like even when earlier I made the comment, unfortunately people have debt. It's not because I don't recognize there are times in someone's life when some people just to survive need to take on debt, right? But there's a lot of people who take on debt not to survive. They take on debt to have a certain level of a lifestyle that they want to have. And that's a whole different scenario, right? Yeah. And so regardless, and that to me is when I often think of like good debt and bad debt, right? I know people use that term differently, but to me, good debt is when you like, it's a need, right? Like it's college and you're being reasonable about where you go to college and what you spend. Again, versus buying a car that's you don't need and that's way beyond your means. A car that you need to get to work that will give you what you need. You might have to, some people have to go into debt just to afford a $5,000 car, right? But they sometimes will go into debt to get a $30,000 car when they could have, done something a lot less expensive.
So you raise an interesting point, Maggie. And I think this is part of the confusion that people have because there is the economic definition of good debt versus bad debt. And then there is the philosophical definition of good versus bad. And so let me talk first about the economic. Economic good debt is otherwise known as leverage. It is when you are borrowing money to then create a business to generate more income. So if you have a rental property, and this is the easiest example to understand, you can put 20% down, you borrow 80%, but then the house is appreciating in value on the full 100%. You are then generating revenue from that asset. Like this is a money-making activity based on your use of debt. That's good debt. Now, you can screw it up and it can become bad, but economically speaking, if you are borrowing money to then go create more money, that's good debt. Now, bad debt, economically speaking, is just buying something you can't afford. It doesn't generate a return. So buying a car, paying for college with student loans, and I'll come back to this one in a second, buying a house that you live in, this is just consumer debt. So I would describe this as bad debt. Now, Maggie, what you're talking about is extremely valid. And so I want to make sure I'm not being too dismissive of people's need to borrow money. Like I borrowed money to buy a house. Now, I've since paid it off, but in order to get that lifestyle that I wanted, I needed to borrow. And that's like the best way to do it. And if you need to buy a car, like in most cases, you have to have a car. Like you will have to go to college if you want a certain type of job. And if you don't have the money, you will have to borrow it. And so it is an effective use of debt, but it is not quote unquote good debt because it doesn't directly generate a return. And I'm hoping I'm being descriptive and fair on the assessment.
I think you are. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right to say, our terms of, good and bad, like there's an actual financial, economical, is economical the word?
Yeah.
Economical definition of how that, I don't know why that word does not sound right, but anyways, definition of what debt is and how banks even define debt. Right. Mm-hmm. But I was using it, yes, in the more sort of casual term of, or the more basic definition of like what's quote good and bad, kind of, you say like philosophically speaking.
Yeah. Now, both philosophically and economically speaking, if you buy a $100,000 car with a loan, that's bad debt. It's bad philosophically. It's bad economically. But there's a lot of gray area. And in that gray area, you need to be wise about how much you pick up and how you pay it off, which is what we're going to talk about some more in this episode.
Yeah. So we did a previous episode on debt. That was, you know what that was?
Episode 87.
Look at you. Episode 87.
No, you're kidding.
Oh, I thought you gave me a real number.
I guessed it. Are you serious?
I didn't even look it up because you said that.
Oh, okay.
Hold on.
I said it so confidently.
You said it so confidently that I was like, look at you. Well, you got the 7 part right. It was episode 107.
Oh, okay.
And it was why you should reject Dave Ramsey's debt snowball method.
One of our most popular episodes ever.
It was prior to the retirement series, it was one of our most popular episodes, Yeah, so we did an episode there, which I would highly recommend people go and listen to because we get into different methods of paying off your debt and in what order you should pay off your debt and all of that. We weren't going to go through the different methods of paying off debt in that much detail because we did it in episode 107. But Mike, maybe you could give a Cliff Notes version of that.
Yeah, sure. So once you are in debt, you need to figure out the most effective way to pay it off. And when we talked about Dave Ramsey's snowball method, it works like this, and this is from his website. But chances are you probably heard of it. You list all your debts from smallest to largest, regardless of interest rate. You make minimum payments on all your debts except for the smallest, so the smallest balance. You pay as much as possible towards that smallest debt, and then you keep repeating this process until all of the debts are paid off. And so it's called the snowball method because you start with a little bit, you pay it off, and then you get bigger, and then like the snowball increases in size. Now, we had a lot of fun coming up with our own name. We called ours the snow plow method. Turns out everybody's come up with this thing. It's like, and we discussed this in the episode.
I honestly thought we came up with that ourselves.
Snow plow, we did because it's a ridiculous name. But there are, I think people call it like avalanche or there's other
it had
things.
It was not, yeah.
Now, but in the episode.
There's no new ideas left in the world,
right.
They're all taken.
But just to be fair to ourselves, like we were not saying that this was like some revolutionary debt payoff.
Yes.
This is just mathematical, how it's most effective. And we were just having fun with it. So Maggie, why don't you go through this one?
So snowplow, coined here, I would just like to add, is the most mathematically based and logical solution, which is you list your debts from smallest to largest interest rate, and you make minimum payments on all of your debts, obviously, because you need to make the minimum payment to not be in penalty and, get higher fees added to you. And then you start paying the highest interest rate first. Right. So that is the thing that is just, again, if you want to save the most amount of money on interest over time and pay as little interest as possible, you want to pay off your highest interest debt first. And then you keep doing all that till you've paid it all off. And then you celebrate. Yay. You're going to it feels really good to be debt free.
Yeah. So Maggie, you usually provide all the stats for our show notes, but I found one that I thought was pretty impactful. And this came from CNBC. I found it via Google. The average U.S. household with debt now owes $156,000 or more than $15 trillion altogether, including debt from credit cards, mortgages, home equity lines of credit, auto loans, student loans, and other household obligations. This is up 6.2% from a year ago. And this is astounding.
Yeah.
Now, if your household net worth is in the millions of dollars and you're listening to this and you're like, well, 155,000, that doesn't seem like a lot. But when you think about the average U.S. household, this is extremely high. And if you think about that total number, $15 trillion is massive. That is a massive amount of debt.
Yeah. I mean, and what's to me, I don't even know the right adjective there, but I was going to say interesting about that, but maybe it should have like a more negative tone on it. What's upsetting or concerning perhaps about that is how leveraged our whole society is, right? Often for consumer goods, right? Mm-hmm. And again, back to the kind of philosophical thing, like it's all your own personal values-based decision on kind of what's good debt or bad debt in the end to you and what's reasonable for you to take on and what makes sense to take on. But ultimately, that stat confirms how much people will take out debt to pay for a lifestyle, to keep up appearances, to keep up with the Joneses, to things that they can't actually afford in the moment. That all they can afford is a small payment on it. They can't afford the actual thing. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, it's not always bad to split up the cost of something over a period of time, but I'm a big fan of, saving for it first and then making a, more fiscally responsible decision.
Let's transition to our list of advice we have when it comes to paying off debt. And again, this is not going to be anything revolutionary. The idea is that hearing a list of strategies will hopefully help you develop and then start on your path to paying this off more effectively.
And we've really tried to focus this list on, I don't know if it's a stretch to call it fun ways to pay off debt, but you can make it more fun and motivating of how you pay your debt off, right? Instead of just being like, well, make a spreadsheet and list all your stuff and blah, blah, blah. That can be really boring and not motivating to some people. And so we wanted to just, again, try to come up with some ideas for how to make paying off debt more enjoyable and, dare we even say, fun.
So the first piece of advice, and this is going to apply to any tough financial task that you have, is decide on your why. You need to visualize how your life will be different when this debt is gone, and then start working towards that. If you don't have a purpose to doing it, even if you are motivated right now, you're going to quickly lose that motivation and all your progress is going to be lost.
Right. I mean, interest payments are really expensive, especially a lot of like high interest. And so your why might be that you realize how much you're able to save for different goals in your life once you're not paying off all this debt. And once you actually get to keep your full paycheck and then decide where that paycheck goes, like that could be a simple why there, right? It could be that you want to travel more and you'll have more money to travel once you pay off your debt. It could be that you don't want to work for the rest of your life and you see the trajectory of paying off that debt, whatever your why is. It could be the feeling. Like for me, it is the feeling. It's why I paid my mortgage off, and we'll put the show notes in for the episode that we do on paying off your mortgage, because that's often the last piece of debt people pay off. And that is, Mike, do you know the number?
No.
That was one of our earlier episodes. That was number 56. Paying off your mortgage is a great investment. We were just we were like toddler podcasters, I like to say at that point. But anyways, yes. So my point is more on the mortgage. Like I did that for emotional reasons, and that's okay. That could be your why, because it feels good to not have debt. Okay. So number 2 is set a clear goal and a schedule to get there. So don't just say, I need to pay off this $100,000 in debt in 2 years. Like that's a really broad goal. Set more clear, specific goals, right? Break that $100,000 into, weekly chunks or monthly chunks and figure out how much you need to pay off each week. And then we'll get into some other ideas around that too.
And this is really important, because if you give yourself a long lead time to start figuring it out, you're going to kick the can down the road, you're going to procrastinate, then you will find yourself with an insurmountable goal. Now, number 3, if you are married or have a partner, explain your plan to them and get them on board. Or better yet, co-create the plan together, because you will need their support. If you are on a diet and your partner always brings in junk food to the house, it will be hard to resist it. And the same goes for money. So you have to do this together. You cannot start paying off debt by yourself without the other person understanding why and being on board with that.
So another thing, number 4, is reward yourself. So as you start to meet these milestones, so if you break that $100,000 into, monthly goals, I cannot do that math in my head, but that's probably like $4,000 a month or something. And that sounds much more doable, by the way. $4,000 a month sounds more doable than $100,000. But anyways, if you break that down, celebrate yourself for milestone. And, you don't have to spend a lot of time or money, particularly don't spend a lot of money on this. But if you meet a big milestone and you say, hey, let's go out and spend $40 on dinner to celebrate that milestone we met of, again, the milestone shouldn't be like every single week that you have paid off your debt. That might be a little bit too often or too frequent of a milestone, but pick something reasonable and feel good about rewarding yourself and celebrating those successes as you have them, because I think it'll help to keep you motivated along the way.
So along those same lines, by creating a reward and releasing a little dopamine, another good tactic is going to be visualize your progress. And so if you are motivated by visual progress, especially if you play video games like me and there's something you're always keeping track of.
Like a scoreboard.
A scoreboard, exactly. Checking off your progress can be a really fun and rewarding way to keep yourself on track. And so you could have one of those thermometers that you fill
draw
up
the red line every time you hit your goals.
Red. You can cross off squares. You can have any sort of visualization that you like with your total debt and your progress towards it. You will start to see your momentum build. And every time you look at it, you're going to feel good. Hopefully you will feel good if you were actually making progress.
Yeah.
If you visualize it and you're doing a terrible job, it's going to be a terrible reminder.
This makes me think of this thing I do for the MINS game, the minimalism game, where you get rid of one thing on the first day and 2 things on the second day and 3. And by the end, it's 30 days and it's 500 things. And they have this really cool, it's just almost like a piece of graph paper, but every time you get rid of one item, you color in a square, and by the end of it, and that feels really good. So take your $100,000 and do a Google sheet or an Excel sheet or manually, if you like to draw this stuff out, something where every little square is $100. Make it as small as you want. If it makes you feel good to color in those small amounts that you pay off, like it would make me feel good to do that. And so, I mean, you can get creative on how you visualize this. That to me is where I think it can get fun. And again, maybe I'm stretching the use of the word fun there, but I think it can get fun to like, find a fun way to visualize your debt. Do it as a family. If you have kids, like get your kids helping you color in, help involve them in it. And speaking of kids, get your kids involved in it. And speaking of kids, another tip, number 6, is to gamify things, right? So you were talking about video games, Mike, but you can visualize things and then you can kind of turn it into a game. There's some different apps out there, which quite honestly, we're not the expert on like debt paying apps that are focused on paying off debt, but there are different apps out there. You can, again, we talked about like doing a visual tracker, but find a way to like turn it into a game and make it like a little bit of just, again, something where you reward yourself. I think the combination of rewarding yourself and visualizing it, you can turn it into this game. If you have friends who are also trying to pay off debt, that's a way to gamify it, to say, hey, we're going to, share our results with each other. And we're going to have like a little competition to see, who's, and maybe you want to be careful with like a competition with friends because everybody's, amounts might be different, but it might be more of, are we all meeting our goals? And when we all meet our goals, again, combining the rewarding yourself, visualizing it and gamifying it, when we all meet our goals, every month we go out for dinner to celebrate, a reasonably priced dinner, or we invite people over and we cook dinner at home to celebrate.
And that's also an example of number 7, which is get an accountability partner. If you are doing this with friends or with your partner or with other family members, use this opportunity to share your results and hold each other accountable. And you can do this with somebody in real life or an online friend. Maggie has a lot of time on her hands coming up. Email her your progress. She will give you some positive feedback in return.
Yeah. And on that note, number 8 is share your results with the FI community. So if you don't already follow a lot of people on like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, or wherever you are consuming your social media, even if you're not a fan of social media, this is where to me, social media can be really good and positive, is the people that you can follow in the debt-free and the debt payoff community and in the kind of frugal community and personal finance community, particularly the FI community. There's a lot of that. And FI stands for financial independence, by the way. But there's a lot of people in the FI community that will give you really good, positive, ongoing feedback and want to hear your success stories, including us, right? So, but there's hundreds of us's out there, right? In terms of different accounts that are...
There is only one Maggie.
There's only one of us. There's only one Mike and Maggie. But there's lots of people out there that you can share your results with and engage with along that journey, because it's really helpful. The power of community is really helpful to keep the momentum up along the way.
And speaking of momentum, number 9, as you make progress, ramp up the momentum. So $100 a week, if that is your target, might be hard at first, but after a year, your lifestyle will have been adjusted and you can do more. Don't maintain a flat level of payoff throughout your entire journey. Start increasing this, and you will find over time that this becomes easier and easier, and you will want to pay off more in addition to being able to pay off more.
Yeah, I love it. Number 10 is when you are done paying off all of this debt, share your story. So we talked about kind of sharing your results along the way with the community, but you've now made this huge accomplishment. It will inspire others. Share it on Facebook to your friends and family. Say, hey, this is our goal of our podcast, is we think friends and family should talk about money more. There's nothing wrong with telling your friends and family on Facebook or over an email, a group chat, however you communicate with your friends and family, and also broader social communities. Share with them how you have paid off this debt and say, look, I spent the last couple of years, we aggressively paid off all of our debt. And tell them how it makes you feel, and just, be vulnerable and share that, because debt is not something to be ashamed of, in my opinion. Back to the stat you shared at the beginning, most normal average people have taken on debt at some point in their lives and have debt. And it is normal, right? It's still amazing to not have it and to pay it off, but it's sometimes harder to do that, earlier in your life. And so the point is share your story, be proud of your accomplishment and success, and tell the world.
And our last piece of advice, throw a party to celebrate when you're done, because you deserve it. It's been it will have been a very challenging experience for you, but you deserve the rewards when you're done.
I mean, I just want to caveat that one, Mike. Save up to be able to throw that party.
Throw an inexpensive party.
Don't take any debt to throw a party. Don't put that party on a credit card. But yeah, throw a party within your means.
All right. Well, I hope this was helpful. I think we should wrap up with our top 3 takeaways, Maggie.
Yeah. Well, before we do the takeaways, one thing I would say is we just shared 11 different ideas. You can stack a lot of those, right? It's not like you just pick one, right? A lot of those things you do, the more you do together, the better you will be at this. And so the whole concept of like habit stacking, I think is very interesting. And so do a lot of those things, do all of them. Okay. Top 3 takeaways.
All right. Number 1, unless your debt is generating incremental wealth for you, you should work to pay it off ASAP.
That's as soon as possible for those who don't know what ASAP stands for. Okay. Number 2, pick your payoff method and stick with it. We recommend paying off high interest rate loans first, but just pick a method and stick with it and stay on track, stay on course.
Number 3, celebrate your successes, however small they might be. You want the journey to be rewarding.
You know, on that note, because I can never do top 3 takeaways, don't get down when you miss a week, right? You got to pick yourself back up and get right back on that, right? So don't lose your momentum just because you might have had a week where you didn't meet your goal, or a month where something came up, an unexpected thing came up and you weren't able to, continue on the plan or the path that you had set. Because for every success, there's probably going to be a time where, you just fell one week, and don't let that keep you down. Get back up the next week.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can always leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can always hit us up on Instagram.
Thanks, Maggie.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Bye.